Okay, there we go. So we're going to talk today about this idea of building an experts database, as we're calling it, for underrepresented minorities in data science. And where this idea came from was an initial conversation with a few folks who expressed interest in standing this special interest group up at the end of the summit last fall. And in that initial brainstorm, this was one of the ideas that came up, that there isn't really a place for underrepresented minorities in the field of data science to do things like network with each other, to find mentor relationships. And then also, there isn't really a way for people to identify an expert in an area of data science that isn't just one of the normal people that we talk to, right? So there are sort of two big problems in that space. One is that we very often just go back to the same experts no matter what. These people kind of get airtime on panels and in discussions and as collaborators as soon as they become known. But maybe more of an important issue is that when we find an underrepresented minority who is an expert in an area, they tend to sort of become tokenized by the field as like the minority person to go talk to about whatever it is. And so there's a burden there that's placed on a very small number of people that the hope is that a database like this could help lift that burden by spreading the attention and opportunities out to more people. But there are a lot of questions about what it would actually look like to build such a database, how it would be used, how it could be used, and thinking about what the potential downsides are. So what we're going to do today is first we're going to go around and do introductions because there's a small enough group of people here, so we kind of get a sense of who everyone is. And then we're going to break out into breakout rooms, have some discussion in smaller groups around a few prompts that are in the document that's linked in the chat. And then we'll come back together and convene. And I think that if by the end of the session, we have kind of come to the conclusion that this is maybe a good idea, we will try this fall to stand up a working group to start actually working through the process of building such a database. For those of you just joining, there's a document linked in the chat that you can take advantage of. So real quick, any questions at this point about kind of what we're doing here and what our goals are? Just chime in or throw something in the chat if you feel like you don't want to speak up.
Well, I have a question.
Yeah.
Is your goal directly to make the database, or just in general come up with ways of increasing or setting up ways of increasing underrepresented minority representation? Or is it specifically you decide that you want to build a database and then think about its use?
Yeah, so the discussion here is sort of is around this database concept. We've had a couple of meetings previously with this SIG where we've talked sort of more generally about what ADSA can do in the DEI space. And this is maybe a more focused session around a specific potential product. Now, one of the outcomes of this meeting or of the following working group, a perfectly okay outcome is for us to say, this is a terrible idea. This is not something that we should do, or we don't really understand how this would work, and so we need to put more kind of thought to it. So this isn't a done deal. It's not like we're saying we're going to build this database, we need to talk about how to do it. This is really a session to talk about whether it's a good idea, what it would mean to actually build something like this, and whether it would make any difference.
Got it. Thanks.
Is that, yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Anyone else?
Yeah, this is Cecilia. I have a question.
Yeah.
I mean, what is the purpose of this database? I mean, is it really going to be, okay, so sorry, just speaking as somebody who has seen, I mean, I've had my name collected as a woman of color many times,
Right.
and nothing ever happens. I don't get invited to give data science talks.
Right.
You know, right there. I have not seen any such database actually do something useful. So I'm wondering, if you are planning to do that, what is your goal to outreach? How are you going to make sure that, you know, you don't have manels, and that, you know, whenever, you know, a data science event is organized, that you reach out to them, you know, as the executive director of a data science institute, and say, you know, here is this database that we've compiled, please use it.
Yeah.
I think that's actually more important than anything else.
Absolutely, and I hope that during the breakouts we can talk about that specifically. What would it look like to usefully make use of such a database and not just have it be another list of names? So I think that what ADSA would do on our end with such a thing is, you know, everything from as simple as hosting the thing and maintaining it to make sure that it's updated, etc. But then also to try to play the role of matchmaking, right? So reaching out to conferences, to individuals at institutes. So we have a fairly large population now of institutes and departments around the US and beyond that we could kind of try to draw into this space and say, here's a resource that we'd like you to consider, so that you don't have panels of all white men, or, you know, panels with the same like 4 people every time. But the other side of that coin is that we would really try to engage the community at large to also take advantage of this resource. So I think that what we maybe don't want is for ADSA to have to be the broker all the time for matchmaking and so on and so forth. If we could create a tool that is available for people to use, and promote it, and have people in our community promote it, then I think that would actually be more powerful than just ADSA saying, here's a thing we made, let's try to, you know, get people to use it. So making it a community-driven process, I think, is probably important here. But I do want to make sure that folks in the breakout sessions have an opportunity to talk about that specifically. How could this actually be useful?
Yeah, Stephen, I'm wondering if we can learn from the databases that some of us have been part of, not me in particular, but some of the people on the panel have been in the past, like CRA,
yeah.
Computer Research Association. I think they've done this in the past. What are lessons learned that we could do it in the right way versus just be another one out there that isn't really differentiated or used? Right. So I think we should learn from what's there.
Yeah.
If we can.
Absolutely. And the other thing that I do want to mention before we split off into breakouts is that, as with a lot of great ideas, not that this is a great idea, but as with a lot of great ideas, it's possible that somebody's already doing that thing, right? And if what we're talking about today is something that already exists somewhere, and what ADSA and this community should do is to throw our weight behind something that already exists and try to you know, generate energy around it, then that also is a perfect outcome. I think that our goal here is not to create an ADSA thing that we can, like, you know, put on a quarterly report and say we created it. The goal here is to try to move the needle on diversity, equity, inclusion issues in data science. And this is maybe a tool or concept that could help with that.
This is Azra Stavros.
Hi.
From BU. First of all, I'll apologize. I'll have to go by 1:30, but Rosie Sullivan, also from the Faculty of Computing and Data Sciences at BU, is staying on. I have a question. When you say experts, do you mean faculty? Do you mean PhD students in their last year? To what extent is the community we're trying to define here? One of the uses that I can see, and I know we're going to talk about this in the breakout, is networking and possibly recruitment of faculty or creating some pipelines for PhD students, etc. So how are we defining expert? I suppose that's the question.
Yeah, I think that that definition is fairly open at this point. We struggled with even just coming up with what to call this SIG meeting, and we arrived at experts database. But I think one of the things that we were envisioning when we were thinking about this initially was, you know, that a PhD student is essentially on the road to becoming an expert, as in whatever general sense we want to think of an expert. And so I think that when we think about what we would potentially like this database to be useful for, I think that PhD students and postdocs and folks who are even also early career in data science should be included here, because we're also talking about mentoring opportunities, recruitment opportunities, as you mentioned. And I think we know that if you could get yourself on a panel at the early point in your career at a big conference, it's kind of it can be an important moment for you. So yeah, I don't know if that helps.
It does. It's just that I think this relates to the question earlier about we shouldn't be replicating things. And I think that we may find that if we focus on, let's say, faculty so I do know there are PhD mailing lists, for example, and other things of this sort. I agree. But if our definition of expert is a little bit more broader, for example, how about administrative folks who are actually working on outreach and projects and so on? They're not faculty, they're not experts in the sense of a data science expert. But where will we find folks like this for networking purposes with corresponding colleagues at our institutions? I think that's basically a question I have, but just how broad or narrow we want to define experts.
Yeah, I think that's definitely a good thing to talk about in the breakouts, and who would we like to see here? Because I think you're right. If we see that such an institution has really knocked it out of the park with their DEI initiatives, I'd like to be able to find the person who's responsible to talk to at that institution, so that does bring in administrators and other folks to talk to.
Thank you.
Sure. So I think it's probably a good time. I see a couple people just joined. I'm going to drop the notes document back into the chat. Probably a good time to jump into our breakouts. So I think what we're going to do is go with groups of 4. You'll probably have one group of 3 because I'm going to be bopping around trying to make sure everything's going smoothly. So I'll break you out into breakout rooms in just a moment. What in the notes document, there's a prompt and a series of questions to try to address in your breakout room. If you could take notes in the Google Doc that's linked, that would be really useful, or at the very least copy whatever notes you take into that document at the end of the meeting. And then we will try to reconvene in 25 minutes or so to have another discussion about our micro discussions, and then we'll see what our next steps are.
So I just want to apologize. I have another meeting at 10:30, so I'm going to have to drop off pretty soon.
Okay. Yeah, you'll be able to catch the recording and take a look at the notes, and I'll send an email out to the group also.
Thank you.
Sure. Okay, great. So I'm gonna try to do breakouts after I stop recording here. Hopefully I don't break everything. Okay, so welcome back to the main session. That felt extra formal. Let's go around. Maybe we could have somebody from each of the breakout rooms give like a 2-minute, and keep it at 2 minutes, run through of what you talked about, issues, and maybe what you think next steps are. And then we'll wrap things up a little bit. So who was in breakout room number 1, just going by what was happening in the notes here? I don't see breakout room 1. How about breakout room, oh, there they are. Doug, Cecilia, and Brittany? Somebody from that group?
Yep. Do you want to go, Brittany, or do you want me to jump in?
You can take it, and I'll just add color if needed.
Great. So 2 minutes. So we spent a lot of discussion about, you know, what would make it a success, right? And thinking about it from the perspective of those who are contributing. But also that it feels a little bit like deja vu for Cecilia, who's done this, you know, and contributed her material, and she's gone right now, so I apologize for speaking with her or for her. But you know, it feels a little bit like this is just a repeat of what she's done in the past. Mm-hmm. So how do we make it so that it actually is usable? Can we get some kind of actionable goal? How do we measure the success of this? Was some of the discussion that we had, you know, and how would it be used? Is it used for conference building? Is it used for mentoring? We really need to define, here's how we would like it, so that we can focus it at least at the beginning. And then, you know, the other piece of it is really connect to all the other groups. You know, she said she started a group for Latinas in computing. So how would that connect in? You know, we talked about the women in data science. You know, how does that connect in? So there's a lot of these groups out there already. And, you know, to the ADSA, are they the connector of all these together, or are we going to build something separately? You know, what's the purpose, and do we need to do it ourselves, or do we just serve as an integrator of everyone else? And you know, you're looking for this, here's the link to go to. So that was a lot of our conversation. Let me stop there, and Brittany, let you jump in a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, you recapped everything really well. A few other things we talked about was just who are the users, and that we felt like there could be some real value in opening it up to people like, for example, me, I'm a project manager who plans events and conferences. And so something like this would be helpful as I'm looking for speakers, but I'm not a faculty, as an example. And then also, how would we find the information? So once all the data is there, like, how is it being served up to the user in a way that would be helpful? So if I'm trying to find a speaker, like, what prompt do I put in, or do I need to look through a Rolodex? Because like looking through a Rolodex doesn't feel very user-friendly. Or if we're going to open this up to helping with like fulfilling job postings, like what does that look like, and does that have a fit here? So I guess that's probably the only additional thing that I would add in based off our conversation.
Great, thank you.
One other thing is maybe I mean, we talked a lot about faculty, and that's who kind of we are. But do we include industry practitioners? Because there's probably more industry practitioners than there are faculty. So that was one of the, we didn't talk about it, but crosses my mind. Okay,
great. How about Breakup Room 2, which is Yasmin, Sharon, and Tyler?
I can get us started and count on Sharon and Tyler to jump in. So we spent a lot of time, I think, looking at how to create the intention of the database and communicate that intention well, and avoid the sort of checkbox fulfillment that the database could facilitate. So the need to contextualize the database and almost have a sort of like onboarding to use that, and really explicit, this is my perspective, that it would be very explicit about use of this database as a tool to dismantle oppressive structures that are in this domain. And your use of this means that you want to be a partner in doing that work, and not simply finding a name to fill a box so that you can say that you have a diverse panel or something. That it needs to have alignment with a trusted organization. Tyler shared a resource of a spreadsheet for machine learning, and I shared a resource for an EDI Speakers Bureau, that they should be opt-in so that people are invited to participate in the database, and then they have the agency to decide if they trust this resource, if they want to be included in it. Just to be very clear about intention and audience too. What I missed, Sharon? Tyler?
Yeah, I think you covered it well.
Perfect. How about
and I'm sorry, to address Brittany's talk about like user experience. was about that you would have a search on subject expertise, right? And then the names that populate that would tie into the underrepresentation point anyway, that you wouldn't be searching on demographic information.
Right.
That's gross.
Yeah. Great. What about Breakup Room 3?
So this is Haley. I can start us off, and Rosie and Evo can jump in. I think we spent the first part talking a lot about who is an expert, going off Azar. He had to drop off, but his comment in the main section, we thought it would be sort of make the database fairly unique and more comprehensive and perhaps more useful to include sort of beyond faculty as experts, but we have a lot of research staff in data science and software developers that are part of data science institutes in academia who aren't necessarily faculty or on faculty track, but are experts in the necessary infrastructure and software development to make data science run. Just including, as I was saying, sort of administrators for diversity, equity, and inclusion, people who have actually made this work. We also talked a little bit about sort of how to use the database. So having a resource that's there and that's dedicated to data science for sort of hiring, job posting, recruitment, looking for collaborators, and also, given that we're all virtual now, sort of advertising any educational opportunities, seminars, workshops that are being conducted by any of the data science institutes that could be shared across the network. Finally, Ivo mentioned that he just joined the NSF Includes network, which has created sort of a repository for experts. It's generic STEM, but you can create groups within it to be particular for particular subdomains. So there's the potential to sort of harness that existing infrastructure and create a sort of data science driven group there. I don't know if anybody else wants to add anything else.
I was just going to complement the NSF Includes network. It's broader than just STEM. It's basically like also people doing like social sciences and things like that, but within the NSF realm and they're doing interesting things working with indigenous communities and looking at how to provide connectivity to unconnected communities and things like that, all the way to more. It's an interesting community. I would encourage people to join.
Excellent.
And I'll just add one last thing. One of the last question that we were sort of debating was how best to incentivize people. You know, once we have folks opt in to the database, how do we get people to actually use it? Not sure if we have any great answers, but definitely, you know, tying it to grant funding and sort of making it a quasi requirement that you somehow utilize and reach out to some of these folks might be a way.
Group 4.
Hi, yeah, I'm Katie Nom with the Northeast Big Data Hub, and I worked with Tian at Columbia and Jose at UW on this. We really focused a lot of our attention on some of the different parameters of the database itself. Had some initial thoughts about who is an expert, including faculty, PhD students, and non-faculty academic leaders, such as diversity officers. A lot of schools have brought on. And some of the services that, you know, they might provide, of course, being matchmaking, delivering keynotes, and providing ongoing mentoring services. I think we're in agreement with a lot of other folks that I'm hearing so far that, you know, this should be opt-in. I'm comparing it to a student data core that we're organizing at my institution, where it's very much an open call to the community who are helping build this program. And there's definitely a need to define the process a lot further to make this manageable and make sure that the load is spread equitably among those who are participating in it. So one great thought that Tian proposed was having a sort of network-based mentoring approach where senior faculty would be working with, for example, more junior faculty and students who are all mentors on this list. But the senior faculty are there to provide some guidance, and for PhD students who are starting to dip their toes in this kind of role, they can be someone to learn from. And that these senior faculty would essentially coordinate interest groups or teams. So if you as a user are looking for an expert on cybersecurity or whatever topic, you go to the senior leader who can point you to an available, perhaps more junior person who would meet your organization's needs for whatever you're looking for. We're thinking overall that a recommended payment structure would really incentivize participation by a lot of folks, particularly highlighting if there is a senior role like this, having some sort of stipend and having the role rotate given the extra service that they might provide. And that, having a sort of payment structure in mind so that, this isn't just a la carte service that folks are expected to provide out of the goodness of their heart, but, really bakes it into a foundational activity, may not only, give recognition of the work, but make it more achievable for people like PhD students who might not be able to put that time in otherwise. We think that there needs to be some ongoing moderation and tracking of participation by the list managers and certainly by the senior teams to make sure that people aren't overloaded or aren't completely dropping off. Finally, explored the benefits of sponsorship for the list, with sponsors potentially being able to help with the maintenance and hosting costs, doing marketing, outreach, organizing events, and so forth, really as a way both to help with those logistical issues and add some prestige to that. I think I've captured our notes here, but Tian and Jose, if there's anything I missed, please jump in.
So I think we need to jump to group 5 because we're running up against time. But we'll hear more from everyone in the future, I hope. So group 5, could you give us a quick rundown and then we'll wrap up?
Hi, Pamela Reynolds here from UC Davis Data Lab. I'll speak on behalf of Elena and Hannah. So lots of great comments already. I won't go back over those. I want to hit on a couple that haven't been touched yet. One intended use that we thought could be helpful is for forming and fostering community groups. So for folks who don't see someone like them in their local unit or don't have that network and really want to connect with another individual that may have a similar lived experience to themselves, this could be really helpful in facilitating that if done carefully and thoughtfully. In the opt-in, part of that would be allowing registrants to indicate their interest, like why they're opting in, right? Is it they want to give talks, they want to be a mentor, they want to be a mentee, they want to become a community leader or join a community locally, regionally, nationally. And then, thinking carefully about allowing for optional identity questions. There are some conferences, Women Data Science was mentioned, where we need to invite someone who identifies as a woman. So it would be really helpful to be able to know who I might, if I want to do an individual outreach to somebody, who would be appropriate on this list. That's very loaded. So you have to put it the optional, and also people mentioned like code of conduct for the list use, I think would be, and expectations for the list use would be really important for those who have access to it. And part of that is the ADSA being, or whoever's, the front face of this being really explicit as to why they're gathering that information in the first place with specific examples and showing like what is an appropriate use versus appropriate use of that space. Keep it growing. That was another thing we wanted to hit on, is that, this shouldn't be a static snapshot of today in an exclusive club. So the advertising we're going to mention would be key, and we probably could leverage a lot of annual conferences to help keep getting the word out there, but it would take everyone in the community to continually keeping this going. Last thing was logistics. So we could think about functionality too. We've been going to kind of the most intense, high effort to impact level, but there may be low hanging fruit too. It may be just having an opt-in listserv that people can post to say, hey, we have this job opening and we're trying to recruit. we're looking for speakers for this conference, allowing then people who are interested to reply to those call ads. So, that's very simple in some respects and probably not as impactful, but thinking along that continuum and where the sweet spot might be to be effective today versus trying to build out something perfect for 5 years from now. So that's my optimistic, pessimistic personal take on it. And I will leave it there because we're already 2 minutes over.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you for all of the updates, and thanks everyone for the discussion. So I think what I would like to do is to take our notes and sort of distill them into a little bit of a report out of what it looks like maybe the next steps feel like. I suspect that what we'll want to do is to call on a group of people to get back together and kind of think through process and maybe make some kind of decision about whether this is a thumbs up or thumbs down idea, and go from there. So expect to hear from me probably early next week with a little bit of a report out, and we can carry on the discussion after that. But thank you all for coming today. I think this is an interesting topic and potentially a useful product, but there are lots of little quirks that need to be worked through before we could make something like this useful. So thank you, everyone.
Thank you.